hey, if your God is really loving, if your God is really kind and a good God, then why does God allow all the suffering, especially allow suffering of innocent people? So someone gets unalived by someone and that person was innocent. We question that stuff. Why doesn't this God intervene, interact, and stop some of this unnecessary violence? And time and time again, Christians come running with the free will. Free will. God gives people free will. And if it didn't give people free will, then it wouldn't be love. Well, if free will is free will, and if that's your defense time and time again, let me ask you a question. What happened to the free will of Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Herod, and many others in the Bible? See, they had free will. For example, Pharaoh had free will, if you will, to enslave and keep the people enslaved. That was his free will. He was making his free will decision. I'm going to keep these people enslaved. My choice. Well, God didn't let that happen now, did he? This God came down and did something to stop Pharaoh's free will. Nebuchadnezzar, his free will said, if whoever doesn't bow down to me, they're going to go in the fiery furnace. Well, God didn't let that free will go either. He jumped in the fire with those boys and rescued them out. Herod wanted to kill baby Jesus, or find and kill baby Jesus. God didn't let that free will happen. Time and time again, this God seems to intervene when it's convenient for this God against people's free will. So, apologetics. What do you say about that?
Okay, so the three examples given by the atheist here is that of Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, and Herod the Great. It is true that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, in essence, altered his free will, which brought about the 10 plagues of the Exodus account. That's true. But the metaphorical elephant in the room is that Pharaoh was already enslaving them, denying their free will to be set free. In Exodus chapter 5, we read about, and afterward Moses. Now, this is the very first interaction between Moses and the Pharaoh. We read nothing about God hardening the heart of Pharaoh. It opens up like this. And afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. So obviously Pharaoh's heart was already hardened against Israel. Matter of fact, I went about counting the number of times that it's mentioned how Pharaoh's heart was hardened against them, and in half the cases, 6 of them, we read how Pharaoh hardened his own heart, or it was already hardened. In the other 6, which is towards the end of the plagues, whenever Pharaoh's fear is becoming more and more increasingly out of control, God begins to then harden his heart more and more. God was using this time in order to set an example for every nation afterwards, as well as to set an example for Israel to look back on. We read in Exodus chapter 10, And the Lord said unto Moses, Go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him. So that was for Egypt in particular, to know that he is the true God, and that thou mayest tell in the ears of thy son and of thy son's son what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that ye may know how that I am the Lord. And what he's meaning by that right here is that ye may know how I am the Lord. Number 1, he is the true God above all idols. None of the gods, quote unquote, of Egypt could do anything against what he did. Number 2, he's the God of all nations, not just Israel, but of all nations. Number 3, he's the God of life and death. He can save and he can kill whomever he so pleases. He is God. Number 4, he is the God of vengeance. He's bringing the vengeance upon Egypt for what they have been doing for hundreds of years at that point to his people. And number 5, he is the God of freedom. He sets his people free. Have you ever noticed how we never hear about Horus or Zeus, any of these other gods of the past? We never hear about them performing astounding miracles in front of an entire nation. There's no record whatsoever of these other gods splitting the Red Sea for the people and drying the ground, or even in such cases like the River Jordan or hailstones or the time in the wilderness. There's absolutely zero account of any of these gods ever doing anything of the sort. However, we do read of the biblical God doing tremendous miracles. He's even walked among us in the person of Jesus Christ and is now the most famous person to have ever lived. I mean, you talk about being the God above all gods. I mean, he's absolutely, there's not even a comparison to be made. And there's so much archaeological proof of the biblical God and these crossings of the Red Sea and all of that. There's so much proof. I can't even get into all of it. So one of the primary reasons God afflicted Egypt was to punish them for the evils they committed against Israel. And yes, he did thwart the will of Pharaoh in order to do so from time to time. Now, the next complaint of this atheist is that God took away the free will of Nebuchadnezzar by saving the 3 Hebrew men in the furnace. Now, you all know of this account. It's of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's found in Daniel 3. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he made a giant image of gold and commanded all people to bow to it. Only the 3 Jewish men refused. Nebuchadnezzar then, by his own free will granted, ordered the men be put to death for their refusal to bow. So he's taken away their free will. Upon being cast into the fiery furnace, the men did not die. A 4th man appeared, whom Nebuchadnezzar said looked like the Son of God. This was Christ in the fire with him. It was indeed Nebuchadnezzar's will that the men be burned alive for not worshiping his image. It was, however, God's will to save them. It was also their will to be saved. So yes, God did change the will of Nebuchadnezzar, or altered it, or that is the consequences, in order to save these innocent and devout followers of him. The last example given is that of Herod the Great's will to kill the Messiah after his birth in Bethlehem. God then warned Joseph in a dream to take the infant to Egypt until Herod died. It is true that Herod's will was to kill Jesus, but God intervened in order to save the child's life. In all of these events, God did certainly thwart the will of these men, but these men were also going against the will of those they persecuted. In every case, God is intervening in order to save his people and the Messiah. But an atheist will ask, if your God is real, why doesn't he help people? This is always the complaint. Well, right here, God is helping people, and an atheist is getting angry about it, seemingly. And the fact of the matter is, he has always helped all people, not only those who love him. As we can read of Jesus saying, he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. But an atheist will then, he'll harp up and say, what about all the other innocent people who suffer and die? Well, the fact of the matter is, my dear friends, as sad as it is to say, the fact is that we all suffer to some extent, whether it be headaches or famine. We all do truly suffer and die. God himself was even born a man, suffered, and died. Isaiah 53 described him, he is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed.
I sit here, and I'm sitting in this room because of medical intervention at the last second of my life. So I know what that means. A cardiac surgeon saved my life, and I wasn't expected to live, no hope whatsoever. In the very same few weeks that that happened to me, my sister's daughter of 22 was carried away by a massive brain tumor, and she didn't get cured. Let me put it this way, this world is full of two things, beauty and barbed wire. Is there any evidence anywhere that there is a God you could trust with it ultimately? Now, the heart, and the main reason I'm a Christian, is because the heart of Christianity, there's a cross. And on it, Jesus died, as you know. But the big thing is that he claimed to be God. So the question in this context is, what is God doing on a cross? And my answer to that is, it shows me at the very least that God has not remained distant from the problem of human suffering, but has himself become part of it.